Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets and every NBA team are preparing for the draft next month, but we take a look at the impact of selecting player X at 8th overall and how you make sure it's the best positional value throughout this very deep draft class. We do that, plus talk a little post-combine chatter, all coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Marbeck. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And, buddy, as we wind down our time, we ramp up the timeline for the Brooklyn Nets and making key decisions here. The draft board continues to evolve, and I think we need to have a discussion about which positions you're still taking a swing on at 8 and whether or not there are better, deeper, more interesting options later in the first round.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how this works out because there's going to be good players here at 8 for sure. We've been down this road many times now with like who is going to kind of be available, and the player archetype is all over the place with who they're going to be able to get. And there's going to be a version of guy that might be like sort of like a board mock draft chalky kind of guy. And then there's going to be higher upside swing archetypes that exist in like the teens, which you could maybe make a case if you internally just, rated them very, very high. I'm telling you right now, some of these guys are going to show up on some of these internal boards. Like this guy's actually like our 7th guy. And it's not going to be someone like that's currently sitting in the way mock drafts are done. And, internal analytic teams, I mean, clearly are like never going to tell you who these guys are because that's proprietary information. And almost every team at this point is probably definitely running, or should be at least, some kind of proprietary model of themselves that just internally evaluates these guys. And they're just not telling ESPN about it for sure. You know what I mean? Like, because that would just undo all the value of it. Right. So all these, but then there's also this piece where, they internally evaluate a guy, but everyone else has him at 30. They have him at 10 and everyone else has at 30. And if you're the Nets, you're like, well, maybe we can wait till 19 to get him. Right. So there's there's just lots of pushes and pulls around things that can happen here. Every year we see guys drafted over slot because either something happened in their process that jumped the guy up a board, or they have some kind of, again, internal metric that said, this is just where this guy's going to get taken. We're not going to have another chance to take this person. So now we're just going to draft him. Sometimes it's Jet Howard and it's like, oh, that might not work out. And sometimes it's Bilal Coulibaly and you're like, that looks like it's going to work out. Right. And there's just lots of other examples through the years of guys who are like, oh, that's not where we thought they were going. They went. Sometimes it's a swing and miss and sometimes it's a swing, but it's all born out of something. This isn't just like these teams just have a dartboard and they're like, ooh, bang, Jet Howard, that's where the dart landed. No, this is all, they all have processes that are different. And I think this draft is going to set itself up for, you'll never get the exact numbers, but it's going to be an internal process draft. And you're going to see the board fluctuate wildly all the way up to draft day, I think.
No, 100%. One thing that I have seen that I found interesting, and I wonder, it's like we've talked about Jeremiah Fears when we talk, for the Brooklyn Nets as a fit, but also just where he's been kind of on draft boards, and he certainly moved himself up and into that top 10, and now it feels like he's right there in that top 7 kind of conversation, even more so. Trey Johnson's another guy that seems to be pushing up there, and those are, you talk about in a deep draft class, and we talk about from a Nets perspective, big swing opportunities potentially at 8 because of where you're picking, whereas other teams, though, think about the Washington Wizards and what they're going to do. They need scoring. Like certain teams, I just think do model to be like, but these guys check like the most of the boxes in this thing that we need them to do. So I do start to wonder about, we talk about the fluidity, as you say, and we said this before, that it kind of starts rated around the 8th pick, I think. Like the closer we get to the draft is the more that for all the tiers that there are, Cooper Flag, and then getting into Harper, obviously, the Edgecombe, the Bailey. Okay, great. But even that next little clump does seem to be defining itself a little bit. And the examples I gave there are Fears of Trey Johnson versus maybe like a Con Knipple versus a Mollywalk. Like those guys, talk about them fondly. You talk about a young age and still developmental and all the areas they can expand. But there's enough of a question mark, I think, in certain areas you say, yes, but if we're pushing or pulling between these picks, it's going to feel a little bit different. Does that seem specifically to Johnson and Fears, does that feel right to you in that regard when we talk about like that 5, 6, 7, and working towards 8, that maybe those two players just have like kind of, the sizzle impact of being in that range if you're drafting and having your fan base get excited that you're taking them.
Yeah, I think I think that's true, and I think it's easy to see why, because players that can do a lot of cool stuff with the ball tend to be more exciting to sort of dream on, right? Like guys who can, that are just straight up like super, athletic point guards that can get to the rim, or guys like Trey Johnson that can maybe just score from everywhere. That's a little bit more pleasing to the eye than maybe a Watch or someone like that, who it's like, well, he's going to be a center and he's going to be a project, and he just started playing basketball, 10 minutes ago, and like, look how far he's come. Yeah. But like, so I get why that kind of player, one, can like move up draft boards, but also would just be more exciting for a fan base to dream on. And so even when we asked, Nets fans out there, it's like, who would you have? Like Jeremiah Fears was one of these overwhelming guys. Like Trey who's the other guy? Trey Johnson. Yeah, for some reason I was saying Trey Johnson.
We're going there. Yeah.
I was saying that, and I was like, it just sounded wrong for me for a second. But or if he falls, we'll get this guy. It makes sense why those two guys kind of get out of sexier. I don't know what word for it is, but it's like more exciting because you can just sort of picture what they're going to do right away when they get there. And some of these other like Con Knipple, it's like, well, he's like kind of good at everything, but not great at anything. And it's like, I don't know. And then still you exciting. Well, it's like exciting sort of, but it's not exciting in like the highlight reel version of like what a lot of people want, which by the way is worth a lot. If you can be a highlight reel, it means you're a good player. And so it's not like those are just empty kind of calories or anything like that. It's like, it's real basketball stuff. So I can see why those players tend to be able to like move up boards in terms of Fears. He's moved up, considerably. Trey Johnson's kind of stuck around here in this range for sort of most of the process over the last year. I think he kind of hasn't moved too much, but he's also
waned a little and then like came back up maybe off the combine a little, right? Like reminded everyone like, no, this is all the stuff that I can do, right?
Yeah, because the combine was like out of this world. Like he was just like made everything, and he's like, oh right, okay, well this translates. Like, and this is something that can play at the NBA level. The guy just can make any shot from anywhere on the court, and so. And I think that could put the Nets in a weird spot at 8, because there's going to be a guy that's going to be a really, really good basketball player, but it might not be as readily apparent about all the different ways they can add value or make it into a sort of a winning archetype as it goes. And I think it's just going to be the theme going from now till whenever the draft. Well, I don't know, when is the draft? I should know this off the top of my head. But when the draft is, in weeks and weeks from now, where we're going to see the board move around a lot. And then we're just going to see certain players that are just kind of considerably more exciting than others, but there are also a group in the teens that's like, has like exciting capabilities to them too, especially where like sort of the way they go about playing the game that you can talk yourself into.
June 25th, 26th, we'll see the NBA draft get underway. Obviously, listen, when you're wrapping up your time on the network, you're as dedicated as ever, but also, if it happens after we're done doing the show, we have some other plans we're maybe making around those days. Now, coming up here in a second, to your point that you just made there at the end, there are these guys, around 8 to 10, 14, in those teen ranges, end of the lottery and back, that are intriguing. So it became interesting to me to take a look at, if you're thinking about player X at number 8, you also have to consider what those other options are at those positions when you're picking at 19, when you're picking at 26 and 27. How do you get the most value, the most bang for your buck at every single pick along the way? I'll offer up a player that came out of the combine with a lot of heat on his name, and whether or not it's deserving of consideration at 8. We'll do that here in just one moment.
All right, before that, tell you about our friends over at Wayfair. The days are getting longer, weather's warming up. Spending more time outside means it's the perfect time to refresh that outdoor space. Maybe you're working with a big backyard or a small balcony. Wayfair has everything you need to make it feel more like you. They got Wayfair has a massive selection of outdoor essentials. Makes it easy to transform any space into your ideal summer setup. They got the comfy conversation sets, sleek dining tables, outdoor decor. They got it all. Most important part, at prices that are going to fit your budget. Maybe you're going for that new patio dining set. Maybe some string lights too to really set the mood. They're going to help you extend your outdoor space. You can mix and match styles all the way through the website. And like I said, it's going to make it price that are going to fit the budget 100%. Shop a huge selection of outdoor furniture online this summer. Get outside with Wayfair. Head over to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home.
All right, as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about the draft, wouldn't you know it, and what the Brooklyn Nets could do here. So we're going to kind of jump in here with, you're watching on YouTube, a couple of bullet points coming up. I wanted to do this comparison of positional value, but it's also worth, I'll throw in the name of Egor Demin, Eric, yeah, that would have been an interesting one. Egor Demin, who came out of the combine being like, this guy has the size. He can certainly be a passer and an orchestrator for your offense, but some questions. And then it was like combine between the actual production on the court and what he showed. And then by and large, most consensus from GMs and front office people have been like, and the interview process was incredible too. And I think when we talk about international players, there's always that style of game that comes into play here. But if we use him as the first example, you're picking at 8, and you talk about like the positional value of what the players are that you could be talking about. So let's assume that Jeremiah Fears is gone by the time the Nets are picking there. We talked about Yakachionis before, and actually am kind of coming back around to him being a really intriguing one, even for the Nets there at 8, though he lives closer to maybe 10 on most boards. But then it's Demin, then it's Traore that we've talked about, maybe Saraf, we've mentioned him before too, and you get into the later rounds. Relative to the rest of that positional value, do you think like a player of Egor Demin's caliber, Yakachionis, both bigger guys, orchestrators for offenses, does it get to a point where you go, well, this might be the type of player to swing on here, because other positions we can make cases for guys at 19, at 26, at 27, and still getting great value and upside in those spots?
Yeah, see, I think at one point I would have said go for the most versatile positional value, that because you can mix and match it with everything. And then at the same time, I'm kind of like coming around on the idea that maybe, I mean, it should really always just be best player available. Like whoever you think is just going to be the best, because and that's really it. And if you just think the player is just going to be the best, it shouldn't matter if like they're kind of hamstrung, they're kind of jammed into one position only. The reason I say that is because your whole team's gonna matter anyway, right? And at that, because we've seen it from these play. I'm gonna use these playoffs as an example here in a second, but like your whole team's gonna matter no matter what. So you're already gonna need to fill out the other 4 to 6 roles that are gonna end up going. But we've also seen these playoffs play in a way where it's like, well, some of these teams' best players are just positionally like slotted into only one position. Like Brunson's just a point guard. Halliburton's just a point guard. Shea is just a point guard. Like, okay, so there's 3 great point guards, and their team, that's 3 out of the 4 East conference final teams. Then you even get guys like Cat. Well, it's like, well, Cat's like pretty much a 5. He's got some flaws, but I don't know. He's the second best player on an Eastern Conference Finals team. And even with the flaws, like he just absolutely showed out won the game for the Knicks the other night by just going completely ham in the third quarter. And so it's like, okay, well, these guys are all just one position only. So it's like, just take the best player and fill out everything else around it, and just still hope you have these sort of like star guys that are going to be there. So I think there was a time where I would have said like 3, a wing creator is the very best thing you can have. I still believe that, but it's hard to look at like who the teams are left and say that, because that's not what's happening on all these teams. It's like all these teams their best player isn't a wing creator. Their best players are basically a point guard. And then Ant, who's like a combo guard basically a shooting guard, and he plays sick defense, and he's like a little bit different. Maybe he's like a wing creator. I don't really know, but like, you know what I mean? It's just not, Tatum's gone. Like, LeBron forever was like this kind of like wing creator guy. Like there's just like these guys that just play up, huge body, and they're also just have like sick offensive games. But I don't know. It's just not how it's playing out in these playoffs. So I don't really know sort of what to make of it. And it's like, have a really great player, have a pretty good number 2, and have no holes the rest of the way. And you can, and get lucky with injuries, and you can kind of be here. Right? I don't know. Like I'm kind of maybe reevaluating how I think about this.
Well, and so, okay. So from that standpoint, like I think I'm following you in your line here, in your thought process of around like, so that would mean, stop me dead right here. If it was like, if Molly Watch is there at 8, that's not the pick for the Brooklyn Nets, because while he may be the best player available, whatever, on the board, technically, it wouldn't represent that version of you're talking about, right? Just have like your number 1, a really good number 2, and a bunch of these pieces. But I would struggle to think that version of that player, if the shot doesn't come around the offensive game, you'd be like, okay, great, we have this awesome anchoring player. He's gotten some comps to like Rudy Gobert, and you go, well, I don't think I want Rudy Gobert to ever be my best player. Now, once you get, Ant, then all of a sudden it makes your team feel a little bit different. And then you bring in a guy like Julius Randle, right? Like, so you start to evolve it. So that's where I bring up guys like Demin or some of these other names. And like, It's like even Derek Queen, who's kind of like floated and now seems to be falling a little bit like towards 10 and maybe a little beyond. Cause I think it's that question you're speaking to of like, whoever you're taking at 8, your first pick, it has to be the guy that feels like it checks that first box. You need all those other pieces to fill it out. I don't know if you can be, I think maybe I'm going against you here. I know I'm stumbling. Maybe it's like the jack of all but master of none kind of is maybe the better version of what you do there at 8. And then you think about these other pieces that are going to fill in or kind of specialized a little more, which would drastically shift how you built your board after you get past the chalk players 1 through 1, 2 through 4 through 5, 6, or 7. Then I think that's why it opens up so much based on how you think you want to build it out. What's your centerpiece going to be? I don't think Molly Watch for me would be like, he's the cornerstone piece of our team, as opposed to maybe listening to some of these other guys and where they could be a year or two from now.
I mean, based on the archetypes we said, that's the best player on a championship level team. Like none of those guys fit the bill for sure.
Right
now, you still need all the other guys too, and the other guys have to be good. Like Chet's awesome, and I said Cat, and neither of those guys really project to be Cat, but like Cat's a great player. He's got some flaws, but he's a for sure great player. And then you mentioned Gobert, and then who am I missing? And then on the Pacer side, you need a Miles Turner, you need a Pascal Siakam,
yes.
But you need these other guys. And we did see that, the Pacers offense just kind of fell apart in the third quarter of, and then we're recording this last night's game because they just didn't have sort of a place to go. The offense was just complete and utter mess for 24 straight minutes.
Creator, right.
and because they didn't have that guy. But none of those guys you mentioned, Molly Queen, would have solved those problems either. So it's hard to envision those guys being, they're not going to be the centerpiece of a championship team. I think we can say that pretty clearly. You do need guys like this, though, at some point. So it's just the math problem's hard. You should always take best player available. But in terms of what we look at for teams that build championship cores, they are built on a guy who can be the engine of an offense when everything else goes wrong. You do need that. Sometimes we've kind of couched that into, oh, this is a top 5 player or whatever. And I think before we use that as sort of a heuristic for anchoring around where you need it. But I think I would amend that to a little bit, say, you need an offensive engine that when all the chips are down, this guy can just go get a bucket. Brunson can 100% do that. Ant can do that. Shea can do that. These guys can go out and do those things. And you for sure, I don't know who, they don't have to be a top 5 guy, but you need to have that guy to win. Yeah. And those guys usually aren't centers, except for Jokic, basically. They're not. None of those guys. Exactly. Those guys just aren't centers. So you just need offensive engines that you can put the ball in your hands and you'd be like, when Brunson gets the ball, I'm convinced the Knicks are going to win. The Knicks, when he touches the ball late in games, I'm just 100% convinced the Knicks are going to win the game because he just has whatever that is. He has that 100%. And if you've mentioned Derek Queen and come on, Molly Watch and the guys like this, I don't see that. Maybe Fears is like that to you. And if he is, then maybe that's the guy. Maybe that's just me coming full circle here. Or maybe some of these on-ball creator guys are like this. I think I could probably say who they aren't, though, in the draft, if we're just trying to couch it that way. Maybe that's where you're driving at.
And that's coming up here in a second. Let's take a look at. Let's assume Jeremiah Fears is off the board, right? Let's assume Trey Johnson's going to be off the board here. Let's build it. What guys are not capable, or at least projected capable, we think, of being that player for the Brooklyn Nets? How does it shift things from 8, let's say, all the way out through the lottery at 14? And whether or not a player we once talked about a lot in Asenge is not necessarily deserving of that pick because the baseline doesn't necessarily exist to justify it right now. Maybe it will in a couple of years, but not right now. We'll do that here to close things out in just one moment. All right. As we tie a pretty little bow on today's Locked On Nets episode, we, of course, remind you that this will be our final week on the show, but the feed will go on. Doug says that at the end, there'll be great coverage. The announcement will be coming up here at the end of the week as well. So you're going to be in good hands heading towards the draft. We always want to remind everybody of that. Now, if we look at this board, I mean, let's talk about Demin. Let's talk about Yakachionis. One of the things about Chionis that I will say for him, coming out of the combine, they reiterated the fact that he had a forearm injury in the back half of the season that took him from being a near 38% three-point shooter to end up being closer to 30, 31%, right? So that skewed it a little bit. But who else if Fears and Johnson are not there, who is the on ball? Give me 2 or 3 guys that are on ball and take it as far back towards 20 as you need to say these are the 2 or 3 players that we believe are capable of that. Because I think those 2 that I just mentioned have to be probably in the short list. And then you also extrapolate out the value of the size, positional size value that could be nice for the Nets in need of an orchestrator on their offense.
Well, hilariously, one guy that is like this is Nick Clifford. He's not going to get drafted here because he's like 55 years old. But but he actually does fit that bill. It's like I feel like he is kind of like that sort of guy to some degree. He's just so
why
old.
some
That I don't
people
think
like
you can do it.
19, like it's been mocked a couple times, and then like 26, like he's on the Nets board. It's hard for us to talk about it at 23 plus years old, but because the mold of player does make sense.
So, I mean, who the guy is a little hard. And if we were sure about it, they would be top 5 picks, right? So,
Right,
we have to couch this by saying this. We did say this with Yakachionis at the time. I'm pretty sure on our pod that we were like, he was injured. And that was what drove I'm almost positive.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm positive we said that. I'm positive we said we were like, that drove the shooting down. And if the shooting had stayed there with him at 6'6" or whatever, maybe he's starting to look like that guy. He probably fits the bill. I think like the Senge could probably get there at some point as like a wing creator, maybe. Yeah, it's like hard. Like I think Demin could too. Like the shooting comes around, he's got the size, he has the vision. Vision counts here too in terms of like a late ball, a late game with the ball, because like you need to be able to score, but you also need to be able to keep defenses honest that you will find someone open if they like dig down on you or they bring help or someone like that. And like he's the kind of guy that's like, okay, if you have to bring extra help, like he's going to actually punish you because he's got the size to see over some doubles and he has vision to get there. So I think like he probably fits the bill to some degree. I think those guys are for sure there. I mean, like guys that probably aren't there are like Jace Richardson.
Yep.
People love CMB. Maybe CMB is like just so good on defense and maybe he's just such a force around the basket that like maybe you get there. Carter Bryant, like maybe there are guys here. Like they just have to like Traore, probably not. Sorber, definitely not. Right? Like I can say the guys, McNeely, definitely not. Like, so I think I can say the guys that definitely don't get there on it. And I get the guys that I can probably, some stuff would need to go right. But as all of our It's a Lottery bros will tell us all the time, all those guys that I mentioned before, like Shea, Brunson, Halliburton, were not top 5 picks either and had to have a lot of stuff go right for them over the years. Right. And so, but again, they fit the same archetype of kind of guys who can have the ball and kind of do stuff. And even Halliburton's like not perfect like this. Like it's not exactly like, he's not like those other guys, really. I really probably shouldn't slot them. He's not in the SGA and Brunson version of, I'm going to get you on my hip and you're dead.
Because I was going to say, because there's that, you go back to game 1 or game 2, I think it's game 1 of that series. It's a great shot where Halliburton pulls back out and toes on the line. So it ends up being a 2, not a 3, and they go to overtime. But also part of the reason why he's circling back to the perimeter is because he wasn't blowing by somebody and getting at the basket the way you talk about when someone's on your hip and completing that move and being able to get to the rim consistently. Now, by the way, he's still awesome and he still did exactly what you needed him to do by getting that game tied and pushing it to overtime. But those are kind of like the fine lines we're talking about here. So what I'll take away from that is, as you mentioned, so that we just ran through that list. I think you're right. These are the guys that aren't there on that list. And I said this about when we're talking about on ball guys, but I also, because we mentioned Molly Watch, if you think about the center position, it's like, okay, so I'm using Tankathon right now, but Molly Watch is listed at 6. Queen's listed at 8. I think he's a little bit lower on most consensus boards now. Then it's Behringer at 20. Danny Wolf, for whatever we talk about, although he had a good combine as well, he's listed at 23. Yep. You get into our boy Renaud. He's now currently listed at 38, though I think he's up in that first round conversation as well. Like, what is the difference between what we see in Molly Watch at 6 versus what we think about? It's hard. Like Danny Wolf, some people say, oh, there's a tremendous value there. We're not making that leap necessarily with him. But what about a floor stretching big like Renaud, who's come around here and now all of a sudden bubbles up, right? Like this to me is the front office. You love to have all the picks, and it's also probably agonizing for everything we keep talking about. It's like everyone's going to judge you. You had so many opportunities, and if you don't hit on half of those, you have 4 picks. They don't have to be superstars, but 2 out of your 4 guys, one of them probably needs to be a star, right? That 8th pick, you'd hope it would be. You hope that 19 has a good chance to be a big high-level star. But even 26 and 27, you're still saying, we want these guys to be rotational contributors. Like, we're not sitting here throwing darts at the back end of a deep class in the first round. Like, we want these guys to represent the bulk of our new core moving forward, potentially. And that's where I find it interesting when we think about centers and bigs here, because all these guys, some of them, everyone does something interesting or well individually. but every one of those guys has big question marks. And that's where I find it fascinating for Brooklyn about they've always needed size. They've always needed more in the front court, but there's a lot of this kind of value in some unique pieces. Like we talk about large size in the backcourt or just shooters, like pure guys that can get a little something off the dribble. We talk about Liam McNeely before getting towards 20, right? Like I find it fascinating to see how you try to build this out.
Yeah, I mean, in the what could go right category, if you look at it this way, you're like, is it unrealistic? Sure, but could you could you literally draft your starting 5 in 2 years? Like it could, like you have 5 picks. They have 5 picks in the top 30. Wasn't the last pick 36?
36.
They have 5 picks in the top 36. It's never happens this way, so it's unlikely. But 5 picks in a deep draft, there's a world where you just absolutely hit the nuts and you just draft and like this, like you just have your starting 5. Now, again, very unlikely, and archetype is going to matter, and like
even
all these guys,
3 of them are your starters, and the other 2 are great bench players, right? Like 3/5 of your starting 5 you get in this first round, and you also get your 6 man off the bench and another key contributor, right? Like that is,
and like Clowney progresses, and Clowney's the same age as a lot of these guys, and Dariq Whitehead kind of builds off what he did at the end of last year, and now all of a sudden you just have a core. And Cam Thomas, like if they re-sign him, we'll see. Like, and you just have 8 guys. And like, I think, everyone, I trend, sort of to the negative side of this a lot of times, or negative realistic. Like, I'm not sure which one's the better word. Probably some combination of the two. But again, like the what could go right category here is a deep draft. They nail it. And you just have core rotational pieces all the way through. And one of these guys gets there in how we describe like sort of what you need for a championship level team. So I don't know. It's not out of the realm of possibility that they nail 3 of these 5 picks, and you combine them with what they already have, and the Nets the trajectory is just totally different going forward into next year and then beyond. I think that's a fairly realistic scenario. It's not unrealistic, right? And that's a nice place to be. They didn't nail it in terms of like getting that top 2 draft pick that everyone wanted, because they still would have had these other picks too. And then you really would have been able to picture it. So it takes a little more squinting to see it now, but it's not out of the realm that they walk away from this and being like, the core is just like really good. And I think if you're a Nets fan, you got to feel pretty good about that. Okay. We're going to go a little bit more into the draft later on this week. Oh, yeah, one more thing. Hit it.
No. And just reminding everybody know, we talked about this off podcast. As we get to our final episode, which will still be a Fan Take Friday as we close things out, it's going to be about what is the Brooklyn Nets franchise over the next 5 years. We'll leave you, casting you off on a beautiful voyage to success and accolades, but everyone can think about that for themselves and where we'll all sitting 5 years from now after the Nets have all of these draft picks. So just something that I'm excited to close out the show where we kind of project forward what will be the case for Brooklyn. And then also talking draft, obviously.
I was going to make a joke about where I'll be sitting, but I'll wait. I'll say that till Friday. All right. We're going to get out of here. Make sure you like and subscribe to these feeds. These feeds are going to continue well into the future, infinitely. So make sure you like and subscribe wherever you listen. Locked On Nets over on Spotify, Locked On Nets on YouTube as well.
We're so busy watching out for what's just ahead of us that we don't notice the beautiful things happening around us. And of course, that is Calvin from Calvin and Hobbes.
Oh my goodness, one of the all-time great poets. We'll be back in tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.